Hi there. My name is Connor, and I'm calling because my son is 15 and really wants to start a little business selling custom sneakers online. The problem is, he'll start strong for a week or two, then lose interest completely. I've tried coaching him on routines and sticking to a schedule, but nothing seems to stick. How do I help him build the discipline to actually follow through?
Mm, that's a really good that's a really good question. So the first thing I would say is you can't just coach him on how to stay consistent without understanding why he stopped.
Hmm.
So I think, the next time he stops, that's a great opportunity to sit down and just really ask him direct questions. What is the next step? Where is he stopping? Why is he stopping? And really get the communication going, right? He could be having a problem and not expressing that to you. He could maybe thought he wanted to do this, but maybe he wants to do something else. I mean, you always hear stories about kids with instruments. One day they're playing the piano, the next day it's the guitar. Now they're not playing anything. And so, like, as kids are learning about entrepreneurship, it's completely normal for them to maybe want to start in one area, but then when they actually see what's required, maybe their attention starts to drift. And so I think the best way to help him at this point is really to just have a real conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing that I was listening to is that he's he's diving into the sneaker world, and as you know, for sneakerheads, that is a complex world, even if you know everything about sneakers. And so part of it may be just the complexity of the business that he's attempting, and not to dissuade him or tell him not to do it, but that's where you come in to understanding the nuances of what he's dealing with. He may be thinking that, hey, I could resell these Jordan 3s for a certain price, and then he reaches an obstacle where market value isn't the same as what he thought. And so for a kid, it that can be a discouraging point. Like, hey, this is my first sale and I can't get my first sale. I can't flip them the way I thought I was going to flip them. It's harder to acquire inventory. It takes a lot more money. And so, just piggybacking on what Felicia was saying, I think the biggest thing is sitting down and having the conversation. At what point is he meeting the obstacle? Because if it's an interest thing, he has passion there. I think, we're off to a great start. But there's something that's happening between getting him from point A of, he started the business to getting him to C, D, E, F, G and making sales, following up with customers. Something is happening. And so understanding the breakdown, is it the pricing? Is it just the business model? Does he understand the business model? Has he done the research? And so again, as dad, you're gonna have to step in and put your thinking cap on a bit, because the sneaker business is not what it was during COVID times where everybody was jumping in and having success. You have 15, 16-year olds becoming millionaires overnight. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. And so I think having that conversation with him and seeing really what his expectations are, I think is gonna, I think it's gonna pay dividends. But that's my take on it.
I think it's also a great opportunity for a nice teachable moment, which is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Right. And so it's important for him to know that because he might be thinking, oh, well, I committed, so I just can't stop.
Right.
Maybe if you find out that there's a part of the process that's not for you, you don't like this idea, this business enough, then maybe it's time for a pivot. And so, that's just also another thing to take into consideration.
I love that. I think you're right on, spot on with that. The pivot is also a lesson that sometimes young entrepreneurs need to learn. But thanks for calling in. That's a tough one to deal with, but you guys are gonna get through it.
People need to learn that, not just young entrepreneurs.
True, very true.
That's someone that's scared to pivot. It's like, wait a minute. The temperature has clearly changed. You know, it's time to pivot.
It's 95 degrees. I still want to wear my mink coat.
Thanks, caller.